When police finally moved in on the Comancheros, what they uncovered stunned even seasoned investigators. Raids across Australia and New Zealand didn't just turn up the usual signs of gang activity. They exposed encrypted phones used to hide secret deals, stashes of high-powered guns, piles of cash, and what authorities call one of the largest cocaine seizures in Australian history. These discoveries pulled the club back into the spotlight, linking senior figures to organized trafficking networks that stretched far beyond their local chapters. Officials released the evidence in black and white, seized firearms, restrained assets, and charges now making their way through the courts. Over the next 25 minutes, we'll break down exactly what investigators found, how they pieced it together, and why this operation hit harder than any before. From the raids on clubhouses to international smuggling cases, the story of the Comancheros is being rewritten by the receipts police placed on the table. Who are the Comancheros? Why they matter? To understand why the Comancheros draw so much attention, you have to know where they came from. The club was founded in Sydney in the late 1960s and quickly grew into one of Australia's most recognized outlaw motorcycle groups. Over the years, their name has been tied to some of the country's most violent moments. The first major shock came in 1984 at the Milpera massacre, when a Father's Day confrontation between the Comancheros and the Bandidos left 7 people dead, including a teenager and nearly 30 others injured. That single incident changed how police viewed outlaw clubs and pushed governments to tighten gun laws. Then, in 2009, another turning point. A brutal fight at Sydney Airport that ended with the death of Anthony Zervas in front of travelers and security cameras. The killing led to high-profile trials and gave police new urgency to form dedicated anti-bikie squads. Those 2 events cemented the Comancheros' reputation. From that point on, authorities didn't see them as just a motorcycle club, but as a serious organized crime group that required constant pressure. Flashback that set the tone for police tactics. 2 violent moments in Australian history continue to shape how police deal with outlaw motorcycle clubs today, and both are tied to the Comancheros. The first was the Milpera massacre in 1984. On Father's Day that year, tensions between the Comancheros and the rival Bandidos erupted into a gun battle outside a Sydney pub. When the smoke cleared, 7 people were dead, including a 14-year-old girl, and 28 more were injured. The scale of the violence stunned the nation. In the aftermath, lawmakers tightened gun laws, and police began what they called constant pressure tactics, keeping outlaw clubs under surveillance and limiting their ability to regroup. The second defining moment came 25 years later at Sydney Airport in 2009. In full view of security cameras and horrified passengers, a brawl broke out between Comanchero members and a rival group. During the fight, Anthony Zervas was beaten to death. The killing led to a string of convictions and resentencings, and more importantly, it pushed authorities to expand specialist squads dedicated to bikie crime. These flashpoints didn't just mark bloody chapters in the Comancheros' story. They rewrote the rulebook for law enforcement. From then on, police responses became sharper, more coordinated, and far less forgiving. Leadership and global footprint. For much of the past decade, one name has defined the Comancheros more than any other: Mark Buttle. His rise to national president gave the club a harder edge and expanded its reach beyond Australia's borders. Buttle lived much of his time overseas, moving between countries while still maintaining influence back home. In July 2022, his travels came to an end when he was detained in Turkey and extradited to Australia. Once back on home soil, he was charged in connection with the alleged importation of 160 kilograms of cocaine, a shipment prosecutors said was worth millions on the street. Those charges are still before the courts in 2025, with Buttle facing a lengthy legal battle. It is important to underline that these remain allegations, and he is presumed innocent until proven guilty. The focus on Buttle didn't stop with him. Authorities also turned their attention to those around him. In 2024, his former partner, Mel Terwisha, was charged with offenses linked to alleged proceeds of crime. Prosecutors claimed she benefited from Buttle's activities, though her case is also ongoing and yet to be resolved. These companion charges show how police have broadened their strategy. no longer looking only at club leaders, but also at the financial networks around them. Beyond Australia, the Comancheros, under Buttle, became known as one of the most internationally connected outlaw clubs in the region. Intelligence reports tied their networks to operations in the Middle East, Asia, and New Zealand, with members allegedly involved in coordinating shipments and handling logistics far from Australia's shores. This global presence meant police had to treat them not just as a domestic problem, but as part of a larger organized crime picture that crossed borders and required international cooperation. Law enforcement officials often describe Buttle's era as a turning point. It was when the Comancheros moved more heavily into high-level trafficking, drawing the attention not only of state police, but also of the Australian Federal Police, AFP, and international agencies. His arrest and extradition in 2022 marked one of the most visible blows ever struck against the club's leadership. As of 2025, Buttle remains before the courts, and his case continues to attract heavy media coverage. His story highlights how the Comancheros grew from a Sydney-based motorcycle club into a group with a global footprint, and how authorities have shifted tactics to match that growth. How police cracked encrypted comms, Operation Ironside. One of the biggest breakthroughs against the Comancheros didn't come from a street raid or a drug bust. It came from a phone. In 2021, the Australian Federal Police, AFP, and the FBI revealed that they had secretly run a global encrypted communications platform called ANOM. Criminal groups, including outlaw motorcycle gangs, believed the phones were untraceable. In reality, every message was being copied and read by investigators. Through this system, police collected more than 19 million messages worldwide, with a massive share coming from Australia. The data exposed how outlaw clubs coordinated drug shipments, moved cash, and arranged violence. For the Comancheros, it pulled back the curtain on networks that had long stayed hidden, behind layers of coded talk and offshore connections. The operation was given the name Ironside in Australia, and it quickly led to some of the largest waves of arrests the country had seen. Dozens of figures tied to OMCGS were caught up, many facing charges that are still moving through the courts today. Raids uncovered weapons, millions in cash, and drugs linked to the plots exposed through ANOM. For investigators, Operation Ironside changed the playbook. Instead of relying on informants or surveillance alone, they had direct access to the conversations of senior gang members planning crimes in real time. It meant police could intervene earlier, gather stronger evidence, and pursue bigger cases that linked individuals to international syndicates. But the story isn't finished. In 2025, Australia's High Court is reviewing how ANOM evidence was obtained and whether it can be used in trials. Defense lawyers argue that the secrecy of the operation raises legal questions, while prosecutors maintain that the method was lawful and vital to stopping organized crime. The outcome of this legal challenge could shape the future of hundreds of cases, including some involving Comanchero figures. Regardless of how the court rules, Operation Ironside proved one thing: outlaw motorcycle gangs could no longer rely on encrypted phones to shield their business. The myth of total secrecy was broken, and with it came one of the most powerful law enforcement tools ever used against organized crime in Australia: New Zealand's hammer blow. Across the Tasman Sea, police in New Zealand have been running one of the most aggressive campaigns against the Comancheros anywhere in the world. Starting in 2019, detectives launched a 3-year investigation into the club's activities. By the time they moved in, officials said that nearly every member of the New Zealand chapter was facing charges. Authorities froze assets, seized luxury vehicles, and shut down the flow of cash that had been fueling the gang's growth. The work didn't stop there. In 2024, New Zealand police struck again with Operation Avon, a targeted assault on the Comancheros' Christchurch chapter. Officers executed raids at nearly 30 addresses and put more than 40 vehicles under warrant. What they uncovered made headlines. Police seized 11 firearms, including high-powered rifles, as well as about 5 kilograms of Class A drugs, mostly methamphetamine, and nearly $250,000 in cash. Investigators described the haul as proof of how deeply the group had entrenched itself in the drug trade. For Christchurch, the impact was immediate. Senior members were taken off the streets, weapons and drugs were pulled out of circulation, and what had once been a strong foothold for the club was effectively dismantled. Police said the raids wiped out the chapter's ability to operate, leaving a visible gap in the outlaw scene in New Zealand's South Island. These results underline what police mean when they talk about finding the Comancheros' real footprint. It isn't just bikes and clubhouses, it's cash hidden away, drugs packaged for sale, and firearms stored for enforcement. By removing those tools, authorities stripped away the resources that gave the club its influence. Operation Avon showed in concrete terms what years of quiet investigation can deliver, and it set an example that would be echoed in Australia. Comprehensive planning, financial restraints, and simultaneous raids can do more than disrupt. They can dismantle entire chapters in one strike. Australia's record seizure that lit up headlines. In December 2024, the Australian Federal Police announced a case that would make front-page news nationwide. It wasn't just another drug bust, it was the largest cocaine seizure in Australian history. Investigators revealed they had intercepted a shipment worth billions of dollars on the street. The scale of the operation shocked even veteran officers. Packed into shipping containers and disguised as legitimate cargo, the cocaine was meant to move quietly through Australia's ports and into the hands of organized crime groups. Instead, it became one of the clearest examples yet of how law enforcement had shifted to target trafficking on a global scale. When charges were laid, the AFP announced that 13 people were accused of involvement in the smuggling plot. Among those named, officials alleged, was the vice president of the Comancheros' Brisbane chapter. His presence on the charge sheet put the club directly in the spotlight once again, linking senior leadership to an operation of unprecedented size. Police stressed that these charges were allegations, with all defendants entitled to the presumption of innocence until the courts decide. The seizure was about more than numbers. It was about impact. For traffickers, losing such a massive load meant financial devastation. For police, it was proof that their international partnerships, intelligence networks, and surveillance work were paying off. The AFP credited months of coordination with overseas agencies, showing that Australian investigators were no longer fighting these battles alone. The bust also demonstrated how deeply outlaw motorcycle gangs have become entwined with high-level trafficking. While the Comancheros are best known to the public for violent clashes in clubhouses, investigators say the real money is in moving drugs. By tying one of the club's senior figures to the largest cocaine haul ever recorded in the country, authorities made a public statement. The Comancheros are not just a local nuisance, but players in global crime. For the public, headlines about record-breaking seizures can sometimes feel abstract. But this case made it tangible. It revealed the enormous stakes driving the drug trade and showed how one successful interception could both cripple a network financially and shine a light on who was running it. By the end of 2024, this record seizure stood as the centerpiece of the AFP's fight against organized crime and a vivid reminder of why the Comancheros remain a top target for Australian law enforcement. What police actually found in raids. When investigators talk about what they uncovered in Comanchero operations, the lists read like inventories of organized crime. Across raids in both Australia and New Zealand since 2024, officers repeatedly found the same categories of evidence: guns, cash, drugs, and the tools needed to run trafficking networks. In New Zealand's Christchurch sweep, carried out under Operation Avon, police seized 11 firearms, around 5 kilograms of Class A drugs, mostly methamphetamine, and nearly $250,000 in cash. They also executed warrants on 29 separate addresses and more than 40 vehicles, demonstrating the wide reach of the chapter's assets. Australian task forces reported similar results. Raids turned up handguns, rifles, and ammunition, as well as encrypted devices such as ANOM phones. Detectives also discovered extraction setups and equipment linked to drug labs. Large amounts of methamphetamine and cocaine were seized in bulk quantities, alongside bundles of cash that, in some cases, totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why do these finds matter? Each item carries legal weight. firearms and ammunition can trigger charges under firearms prohibition orders, which outlaw members are often already subject to. Cash seizures serve as evidence of proceeds of crime and can be restrained or confiscated under financial laws, cutting off the money that funds operations. Encrypted phones link members to conversations about shipments or payments, giving prosecutors direct communication evidence. And of course, large drug quantities are central to trafficking cases, proving intent to distribute rather than simple possession. Together, these discoveries paint a picture far beyond the stereotype of patch bikers at a clubhouse. They show organized networks with weapons to enforce debts, drugs to sell, cash to launder, and encrypted devices to coordinate across borders. For law enforcement, every seizure is more than contraband. It's a building block in court cases designed to strip the Comancheros of power and dismantle their criminal infrastructure piece by piece. The playbook: how police keep pressure on. Over the past decade, police in Australia have built a standard playbook for dealing with outlaw motorcycle gangs like the Comancheros. Instead of waiting for violence to break out, they apply constant organized pressure using specialist squads and national task forces. At the top of that list is National Task Force Morpheus. This group links state and federal agencies and focuses specifically on OMCGS and their financial networks. Officers target not only drug trafficking, but also the illicit tobacco trade and unexplained cash flows, both of which have become major income streams for bikie gangs. By cutting off these sources of money, Morpheus aims to weaken the groups from the inside out. On the ground, states have built their own rapid response units. In New South Wales, the Raptor Squad has become a constant presence, carrying out raids, vehicle stops, and compliance checks to disrupt Comanchero activity. In Victoria, the VIPER Task Force does similar work, combining surveillance with high-profile enforcement actions. And at the federal level, the Joint Organized Crime Task Force, JOCTF, brings multiple agencies together. In one 2024 operation, JOCTF officers seized firearms, explosives, and close to $1 million in cash, proving that the networks extended well beyond motorcycles and into large-scale organized crime. Police also rely on strong legal tools to keep pressure on. Proceeds of crime laws allow them to restrain cash, vehicles, and property linked to alleged trafficking, often before a trial is finished. That starves clubs of resources and sends a message that profits can disappear overnight. At the same time, firearms prohibition orders, or FPOS, give officers authority to search members and seize weapons without warning. These orders are used aggressively against outlaw clubs, preventing them from stockpiling the guns often recovered in raids. Together, these measures form a relentless strategy. The idea isn't just to respond to violence after it happens, but to squeeze the Comancheros and similar groups constantly, financially, legally, and physically, until their ability to operate is sharply reduced. Court status to watch. As of 2025, several major cases linked to the Comancheros remain before the courts, and their outcomes will shape how police operations move forward. One of the most closely watched developments is the High Court review of Operation Ironside evidence. Defense teams have challenged how messages from the ANOM encrypted network were obtained, and the ruling could determine whether that evidence stands in dozens of organized crime prosecutions. Until the decision is handed down, the future of many cases remains uncertain. At the same time, former Comanchero leader Mark Buttle is still facing trial over the alleged importation of 160 kilograms of cocaine, a shipment worth millions, on the street. His case continues through the courts in Australia. In a separate matter, his former partner has been charged with offenses linked to alleged proceeds of crime, showing how prosecutors are targeting financial connections as well as alleged trafficking. It is important to note that all of these remain allegations, and every defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Why this rocked the Comancheros? The combined weight of these operations has shaken the Comancheros more than at any time in their history. In New Zealand, police dismantled an entire chapter, charging nearly every member and stripping away firearms, cash, and drug supplies. That kind of clean sweep sent a clear message. Entire branches could be wiped out in one strike. At the same time, Australia recorded its largest ever cocaine seizure, with prosecutors alleging that a senior Brisbane Comanchero was part of the plot. Linking the club's leadership to a billion-dollar drug haul showed just how high the stakes had become. Across both countries, repeated raids kept turning up the same combination: guns, cash, and drugs, demonstrating a consistent criminal footprint that police could hit from every angle. And with encrypted phone operations like Ironside, law enforcement now had the ability to see inside networks once thought untouchable. Finally, task forces such as Morpheus expanded the battlefield by targeting the illicit tobacco trade and unexplained cash flows, cutting into revenue streams that kept the club alive. Taken together, these blows didn't just disrupt the Comancheros, they redefined how police fight outlaw motorcycle gangs. For now, the clearest record comes directly from official sources: the Australian Federal Police, New Zealand Police, and state-level task forces. Those agencies will continue to release the facts as they happen. And that's where the next chapter of this story will be written.